They said, "Don't bother, Doc. She's at the end anyway." Those words hit me the way dry wind hits an open cut, quick, sharp, and humiliating in a way that doesn't bleed until you're alone. Not because the doctor meant them. He didn't. He was only repeating what my son said, like he was reading out a note from a chart, like it was just information, the way someone says the roads are closed or the power might flicker tonight. But it was Daniel's voice I heard. Impatient, small, a voice that knew exactly where the soft places were in a mother's heart. My name is Ruth Henderson. I'm 70 years old, and I live in Texas, in a little town outside San Antonio, where the heat comes early, the sky goes on forever, and people still wave, even when they don't really know you. My house sits on a quiet street with cracked sidewalks and stubborn grass that keeps trying to grow back no matter how hard the sun works against it. I have roses along my front walk and a pecan tree that drops its mess in the fall like it owns the yard. The kitchen window catches the late light around 5 in the afternoon, and it turns my counters gold, like something holy is still allowed to happen inside ordinary rooms. I keep a cardigan by the back door, because the air conditioning in Texas is either too strong or not strong enough, and life is always about adjusting. On the mantel, there's a photograph of George, my husband, smiling with that gentle, tired pride of a man who built things that were meant to last. He is gone now, but the house still holds him in the corners, in the banister his hand polished smooth, in the little squeak in the third stair, in the way the screen door closes like a memory. If you're watching this, tell me where you're watching from. It makes this feel less like a confession and more like a conversation. People ask how a whole life can be boiled down to one line. I'll tell you the truth. A life doesn't get boiled down all at once. It gets reduced slowly. By comments, by assumptions, by other people deciding your end for you while you're still standing there breathing. George worked his whole life building our place. He was Texas through and through, not loud about it, not a flag waver, just steady. The kind of man who fixed what broke, paid what he owed, and believed a handshake was still worth something. He used to say the house was his story, and the garden was his afterward. When he died, that afterward became mine to tend, and I did. I planted every rose bush with my hands. I painted the trim myself one summer when George's back started giving out. I learned how to kill fire ants with boiling water and prayer. I learned which neighbor's dog would dig under my fence and which one would just bark like he was employed by the devil. To me, this house isn't plywood and nails. It is mornings when I still half expect to hear George laugh by the sink. It is our grandchildren's handprints on the window frame.
It is the smell of late roses in July, when the heat makes the air taste sweet and heavy. But to some people, a house is just a number, a thing to be fixed and sold, a clean transaction. The day Daniel said that line, we were sitting in a doctor's office that smelled like cheap magazines and disinfectant. The exam table paper crinkled every time I shifted. The fluorescent light hummed like a mosquito you can't swat. Daniel sat too close to me, like proximity could hurry time. Tasha, my daughter-in-law, stood near the door with her arms folded, jaw tight, eyes busy the way people's eyes get when they're already planning what they'll say next. The doctor asked me how I was, and I told the truth. My knees ache in the mornings. My memory plays tricks sometimes. I misplace things and then find them where I would never put them. I worry about problems I used to solve with lists. Simple, honest things. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that meant I was finished. Then Daniel spoke. Soft, matter of fact, like he was doing everyone a favor by getting to the point. Don't bother, Doc. She's at the end anyway. I swear the room tilted. The air went thin. My hands, the hands that planted every rose outside my front walk, went cold. I remember my fingernail catching on a loose thread in my cardigan sleeve, and the ridiculous, desperate urge to smooth it out, like that could smooth out what he'd just done to me. I could have stood up. I could have told him to get out. I could have said, "You don't speak for me." But I didn't. Not then. Because when your child decides you're a problem to solve, the world expects you to be grateful he's helping. And there's a particular kind of shame in realizing someone you raised is already treating you like the last chapter. I went home with a stone in my chest. The roses smelled like nothing. At night, I lay awake listening to my house breathe, the soft creak of wood, the distant hum of a neighbor's air conditioner, the sound of cicadas outside like the world refusing to be quiet. And I started replaying years of Daniel's little comments that sounded like caring until you listen closer. "We'll move you closer to us," he'd say casually. "It'll be easier for everyone." When did easier become shorthand for without your input? The next week, small things started happening. Threads being pulled. A letter from the utility company was on my kitchen table already opened. The envelope had a crease like someone had read it. Another day, I found a brochure from a real estate agency wedged in my door. Maximum return with minimum fuss. And in Texas, where property taxes can eat you alive if you miss a deadline, where a house isn't just sentimental, it's survival, that brochure felt less like an ad and more like a warning. One afternoon, while I watered the geraniums, a car I didn't recognize pulled up. A man with a folder walked to my porch.
He stood there looking at my windows as if he was measuring my life. Then he left. No knock, no note, just a presence. A message without words. "We're coming." I didn't tell Daniel I noticed. I started listening instead, watching, learning the rhythm of his visits, the way he looked at my counters like he was cataloging what would be cleared out, the way Tasha's eyes landed on the living room like she was rearranging it in her head. And one afternoon, I overheard her on the phone near my sink. "I mean, once she's gone, we'll fix it up," she said, voice bright with calculation. "It'll be worth something. We'll probably sell. Once she's gone." Like I was a storm they just needed to wait out. I stood there behind the hallway corner holding a dish towel, and I realized something that made my whole body go still. They weren't waiting to help me. They were waiting to outlast me. That night I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because some grief turns into a kind of cold clarity. Options are often made of small decisions, not swords. Telephone calls, paperwork, the steady work of showing up. The first call I made was to a woman from church, Judith Clean. We weren't close, but I knew her character. Calm, steady, the kind of person who can hold a room together without raising her voice. I knew she was a lawyer, not flashy, no big show, just competent. When I told her what was happening, she didn't gasp. She didn't promise revenge. She listened. Then she said, "Come see me. Bring everything you have about the house and George's papers." Judith's office smelled like tea and old paper. Books lined the walls like quiet witnesses. She offered me the chair by the window where the light was good, and asked questions I hadn't thought to ask. Who has access to your accounts? Who was listed on the deed? Did you sign anything that granted authority? Do you have a will? A power of attorney? Anything that someone could twist? Her voice was practical, not dramatic. It was a map being drawn. "I can't promise you anything," she said, "but there are tools, and we can use them. Tools, not weapons. Tools." That word mattered to me, because I didn't want to destroy my son. I wanted to protect myself. We went through boxes of old statements, George's will, property tax receipts from Bexar County, the deed papers that still smelled faintly like the manila folder they'd lived in for decades. Judith pointed out something simple and dangerous. Convenience can become vulnerability. If you let someone help for long enough, people start to confuse access with entitlement. She suggested a living trust. She suggested separating any accounts that allowed someone else to move money without my clear consent. She suggested making my wishes unignorable. And when she said, "We'll do this carefully and legally," something inside me unclenched. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't just waiting for my life to be arranged. I was acting. The paperwork was ordinary,
Typed lines, signatures, a notary stamp. But every page was also a boundary. Every signature felt like putting a stake in the ground. I pictured George signing his name when he paid for something for the house, that little flourish he always did, like he was proud to be responsible. I signed slowly, like the ink mattered. Because it did. I didn't announce any of it. I didn't confront. I didn't threaten. I let them keep underestimating me. People don't realize there's power in being underestimated, especially as an older woman. They assume you're confused. They assume you're tired. They assume you'll comply. And when you don't, it shakes them in places they didn't know were fragile. I kept copies in a folder in the drawer of my kitchen table. That drawer became my quiet insurance. At night, I would open it and read the pages like a woman counting cards in a deck. There was a faded note in George's handwriting I found tucked inside an old envelope. It said, "Leave it for Ruth. She knows how to keep it." I pressed it to my chest sometimes, not for drama, for strength. Then came the day Daniel arrived unannounced. He walked into my kitchen like the space belonged to him. Tasha followed, carrying coffee, moving like an ally who'd already chosen sides. "Everything okay, Mama?" Daniel asked, eyes flicking to the drawer like he could sense what was inside. "Everything's fine," I said. Short. True. Contained. They left. And later I found a realtor's card under my porch mat. The same name as the brochure. That was the moment I understood this wasn't paranoia. It was a pattern. And patterns have outcomes. A week later, I signed the final documents. I went to the hairdresser that morning because there is power in looking like yourself. Not young, not perfect, just yourself. I wore the cardigan with pearl buttons George always complimented. And when I came home, I bought a packet of bluebonnet seeds. Because in Texas, bluebonnets are stubborn beauty. They grow where they want, even when the world is rough. I planted them that afternoon. A small, defiant punctuation mark. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was clipped and professional. A bank representative requesting a routine review due to recent changes. My stomach didn't drop. It went still, because I knew what that meant. Someone had tried to move something. Someone had tried to access something they no longer could. And the next morning, Daniel called. His voice had that edge, the one that tries to sound concerned while it's actually trying to regain control. "Mama, you okay? I just wanted to—" "I'm fine," I said. A pause. Then he said, "The bank called me this morning, said they needed to talk about changes. I told them I'd come sort it out."
He said it like it was normal, like it was his job, like my life was still his to manage. "Come by around 5, I told him. He sounded relieved. "We'll bring dinner." When he said that, I thought of all the casseroles people bring when there's grief. Sometimes casseroles are love. Sometimes they're camouflage. They arrived early. Daniel and Tasha walked through my gate with that purposeful movement again, agenda in their posture. They set the dish down, kissed my cheek, sat at my table like they'd already claimed it. The kitchen smelled like garlic and melted cheese. The light through the window was late and kind, almost mocking. Then my phone rang again, and Daniel, without even thinking, picked it up. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was thin and businesslike. "This is the bank calling regarding an account ending in 773. We need to confirm identities and note that access permissions have been amended." Daniel's grip tightened. "Yes, this is Daniel Henderson. I'm with my mother. What changes?" A pause. Then the representative said, "Our records show a living trust has been established naming Ruth Henderson as trustee. The primary deed has been transferred into that trust.
Account access has been restricted to protect the trustee's wishes. The air changed. Tasha stopped moving. Daniel laughed, a thin, disbelieving laugh, the kind people do when they want a thing to be a mistake so badly they try to bully reality into becoming one. "No," he said. "That can't be right. Mama, did you do something?" I looked at my son, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't look away. "I did what I needed to do," I said quietly, with Judith. His face shifted like weather. Confusion, anger, then something else. Fear. Because boundaries scare people who planned on you having none. "You did this behind our backs," he snapped. I shook my head. "No, Daniel. I did this in front of a notary." Tasha's voice came out soft and sharp at the same time. "You should have told us." And I said the truth I'd been holding like a stone. "You were already talking about once she's gone. You were already leaving brochures. You were already planning. You just didn't realize I could still hear." For a moment, nobody spoke. Only the clock over my stove, ticking like a witness. In movies, this is where the villain reveals themselves. But real life is uglier. Because the villain is sometimes your child, and the child is still someone you love. Daniel paced my kitchen like a man who'd lost the map he thought he was holding. "You don't trust me?" he asked, hurt suddenly, as if my protection was an insult. "I trust you to be my son," I said, "but I don't trust you to put my wishes first, and that's the part you don't want to admit." Tasha's face went hard. "So what now?" she asked, too quickly. "We can't sell it?" I held her gaze. "No, not while I'm alive. Not while it's protected."
The house stays under my stewardship. I saw it then. The truth. Not even hidden. Plain in their expressions. This wasn't about my comfort. It was about their timeline, their payout, their idea of efficiency. Daniel's voice broke. Not a sob, but that brittle surprise of a person realizing they were caught. "You could have talked to me face to face." I nodded slowly. I thought about it every night. And I realized something, Daniel. Telling someone only works if they respect you enough to listen. They left that day with stiff bodies and stiff words. Daniel set the empty casserole dish on my counter and said, "Think about us." He meant, "Think about what you're costing me." I watched them walk out. And when the door closed, my house felt bigger. Not emptier. Bigger. Like it could breathe again. Days passed, and then weeks. Daniel's calls changed. Less directive. More awkward. He'd ask how I was, then fall quiet, like he didn't know who I was now that I wasn't compliant. Tasha stopped dropping by. The neighborhood stayed the same. Dogs barking, kids riding bikes, the smell of barbecue drifting from someone's backyard. But my home felt different. Because I had made a boundary that could not be undone by someone else's impatience. Then something happened I didn't expect. One morning I woke up with a tightness in my chest I couldn't explain away. Not fear, not anxiety, something physical. I sat at my kitchen table, hands around a mug of coffee, and stared at the sunlight on the counter, that same gold light. And I thought, very calmly, if this is my last day, I want it to be mine. I called Judith. I told her I wanted one more update, one more safeguard. Not for me, for what happens after. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't want to fight. I wanted peace. That week I wrote letters, real ones, on paper, one to each grandchild. I wrote about George, about the roses, about how dignity is not a feeling, it's a practice. And I wrote one to Daniel. I did not accuse. I did not scream. I wrote the truth. I loved you when you were small enough to fall asleep on my shoulder. I love you now, but love is not ownership, and my life was never a problem for you to solve. Then on a Sunday afternoon, the bluebonnets in my yard finally sprouted. Tiny, stubborn, bright. I sat on my porch with a glass of iced tea, listening to the cicadas, watching the sky stretch out like Texas does, endless, unapologetic, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Not triumph. Relief. That night I went to bed, and I didn't wake up. No dramatic scene. No ambulance lights. Just quiet. A life ending the way so many do. Not with noise, but with a last breath taken in a familiar room. When Daniel found out, he came to the house like a man running too late to stop something. He walked through my front door and froze in the hallway like the air had turned to glass. The roses were blooming. The kitchen smelled like lemon cleaner. My cardigan still hung by the back door, and my photograph with George sat on the mantel, unchanged. At the funeral, Daniel stood at my casket with his jaw clenched and his eyes too dry. He looked like a man trying to stay in control of something that had already slipped through his hands. Tasha sat beside him, stiff and furious, not grieving me, grieving the inconvenience of grief. After the service, Daniel didn't go home. He drove straight to the bank, then to a lawyer, then to the county office, because now he needed answers. Now he wanted to sort things out. Now he was ready to take over, the way he had planned to. And that's when he learned the truth. Not from me, not from a conversation, from paperwork. The trust stood, the deed was protected, and the house he thought would be his reward for waiting me out, had conditions. He could not sell it, not for years, not without meeting requirements, not without honoring the terms. And the biggest term was this: when I died, the home would not go to him, not in the way he expected. I left it to my grandchildren, held in trust, with a clause that it could not be sold until the youngest turned 25. I left a portion of the account funds to a women's shelter in Texas that helped older women who'd been discarded by families that called it help. And I left Daniel something else, a letter, a sealed envelope Judith delivered in person. Daniel opened it in his car, hand shaking, Tasha beside him, already angry. And inside was my handwriting, steady, clear, deliberate. It said, "You thought I didn't matter because you had already decided my ending, but my ending was never yours to write. I didn't punish you. I protected what your father and I built, and I protected your children from learning the same lesson too late, that love without respect becomes hunger." Judith later told me, because she called and cried when it was over, that Daniel sat in his car for a long time, holding that letter like it weighed more than the house ever could. He didn't cry right away. He just stared. And when he finally broke, it wasn't because of money. It was because he suddenly understood what he had done. He had treated his mother like a deadline. And now, there was no later to fix it. No, I'll stop by tomorrow. No, we'll talk. No warm kitchen light waiting at 5 in the afternoon. Just silence. And a truth that landed too late to soften anything. I had been a person the entire time. Not an obstacle. Not a burden. A person. And he didn't fully see it until he stood in my empty house and realized the world didn't revolve around his schedule. People ask if I regret it. The trust. The boundaries. The quiet way I protected myself. No. I regret the pain. I regret that my son made choices that cost him something he can't buy back. But I do not regret refusing to be reduced.
Because being old does not mean being finished. And in Texas, we have a saying, at least the older folks do, that the land remembers who tended it. My garden remembered me. My house held my name. My grandchildren ran through my rooms like the future still belonged there. And Daniel learned the truth too late. He learned that a mother's dignity isn't a thing you inherit after she's gone. It's a thing you honor while she's still here. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're an older person watching this, or you're caring for one, remember, your dignity is not a feeling, it's an inventory. It's the right to decide, and the right to say, I decide how my story ends.